Okay, I guess we are ready. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Dan Gagnon. I am the Vice President of Global Strategy for UPS Healthcare. I actually started as a driver 34 years ago, believe it or not. And today I have the fortunate position to lead our global group, our healthcare division. Our UPS Healthcare division is part of the big brown UPS that you know. We're about a $9 billion organization within UPS, and we focus on the distribution of complex medical products, biologics, vaccines, tissues, surgical kits, and that's all over the world. If any of you had a Pfizer or Moderna vaccine in the last couple years, it is highly likely it's actually come through the UPS distribution network. So we do have a connection there. So before we begin, I just wanted to pass it along and have our distinguished panelists. I think we've got an exciting conversation today, and I'm going to first pass it over to Patrick.
Thank you, Dan. Glad to be here. My name is Patrick Cashman. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for most of my career. Started out with SmithKline and then SmithKline Beecham, and went to work for Pfizer as well. Spent some time in Lundbeck, a company that makes medications for psychosis, depression, and neurological diseases. And then more recently here joined US Antibiotics. And US Antibiotics is the last antibiotics facility in the United States to make amoxicillin. So I'm happy to be here to share some ideas with you.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning, everyone. This is Asha D'Souza. I'm here from Amazon, particularly AWS, the cloud division of that company. My journey has been, I have spent 25 years in the industry, and from last 2 years, I'm with AWS. I have spent time in Amgen, Gilead, Genentech, Roche, all the brands that you are familiar, and most of it was on the large molecule side. And I have also done some work in medical drug device combination therapies, health tech, etc. It's exciting to see all of you here today, and I'm looking forward to share some of our thoughts on very compelling topics that we're going to be discussing. Thank you for being here and opportunity for us to be able to talk with you today.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Souza. Before we begin, obviously the session is going to be on understanding and fortifying the pharma supply chain. When we look back at the last 3 years, it's been really, really interesting, not only in our personal lives, but in our professional lives. We've been locked in for at least a couple of those years, and I think all of our digital technology skills have significantly enhanced. Who would have thought we would have been ordering toilet paper and toothpaste and McDonald's French fries for delivery? But when you look at the changes and the companies that have changed over the last 3 years, the ones who have made healthcare easy are the ones that are successful. And a lot of them are high-tech companies, which I think is very, very interesting. Over the last couple of years, a few other things have dramatically changed. When you take a look at drug innovation, we now have new kinds of products out there that are actually more effective against chronic disease. The drug pipeline, drug development pipeline, has significantly shortened, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. With all of this, when you look at around the world, so many countries that had either full lockdowns, airport lockdowns, a lot of the manufacturers had to change some of their supply strategy. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well today. And last, and I love the opening because I'll share a few interesting stories about collaboration, because with healthcare, obviously it's highly regulated. And I think these last few years have really set a new tone and direction for how public and private organizations are collaborating. So we'll chat about that as well. All right. With that, why don't we, let's get started with the clinical supply chain. We'll start with the pharma supply chain. We're going to start clinical, and we'll work our way through commercial. When we take a look at clinical and clinical trials and drug development, when we look back, chickenpox took 34 years for us to create a vaccine. Measles was 9 years. And then you look at COVID vaccines, and certainly we had a little bit of help, but at the end of the day, it was under 12 months. So I'd like to start with you, Dr. Souza. When you look at that shortened supply chain, Is it sustainable, is drug development sustainable in terms of that shortening supply or shortening chain? What's the impact to the pharmaceutical industry? And then what's the impact to supply chain? I'd like to get your perspective on that.
Happy to talk about that. What we have witnessed is something never happened collectively, is bringing the vaccines within months, which is never heard about. It always took that many years for any product to go from idea to the patients. How did that happen? What exactly changed? The most important thing is everybody in our ecosystem came together and worked together to enable that, right from the regulators, policymakers, to the entities involved in ensuring that molecule that is going to address our need is moving fast. And there was a pressure, there was a need, people were dying in hundreds and thousands every day. The beauty of that is we could do it and it has happened. And what it has taught us is how can we repeat that success? How can we move the other molecules in R&D pipeline to the market faster? And that requires concerted efforts by the industry to remove the frictions that they have been traditionally having in those workflows and try to bring the speed and agility in the process. One important thing we are observing is willingness to digitalize, willingness to unlock the value from data and make data more actionable. We heard from Dr. Calif today how it is important to collaborate, how it is important to pay attention to the data coming from all potential sources, including social determinants of health. Including now with clinical trials, we are observing there is a need for industry to directly go to the participants, the patients who are into trial. Traditionally, we send the drugs to the sites and then to the patients, but people are exploring what we call it decentralized clinical trials. And what does that mean is very digitally connected, real-time information. Patients are providing their own outcomes either through mobile apps or through the wearables. And the people behind the scenes who are looking at the clinical trial protocols are able to make adjustments to those and bring better success to that molecule to move faster in that journey. So with that said, we all need to be working collectively to continue the momentum, if you will, of moving things fast, bring the speed and agility, think about where we could apply technology and unlock potential of what is possible, and pay true attention to one important thing that which we talk about with the industry leaders is if we do not think about disrupting the way we have been doing things, somebody is going to disrupt your business. So it's very, very important to embrace modern way of doing things and change the way we have been doing the care historically. And it is going to be important to improve the longevity that we heard about in this country, as well as the quality of health to the patients wherever they are at. There is so much happening, and I could go on and on, but let's have.
No, thank you. You're bringing to, this is kind of interesting when you look at the drug development pipeline right now. 55% of what's in the pipeline is a biologic. And I think more interesting is when we look at what happened over the last few years, mRNA vaccines were actually used commercially on a very, very broad scale. And a lot of them do require, to be frozen, at least during the logistics process. So this might be a good shift to you, Patrick, when we talk about cold chain, because obviously when you get out of, clinical trial and now you need to produce, you got to move API, drug manufacturing. We're talking a different cold chain, not the 2 to 8, but -20 to -80C. I'm curious to get your perspective in terms of cold chain. Are we better today after COVID? What are some of the issues we still need to work on? What are some of the things that you think came out that perhaps are going to help us in the future with this pipeline?
I think we've improved greatly over this period of COVID, and I think we've all learned a great deal. And as a matter of fact, I think the infrastructure is much, much better now than it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. What we need to do, I think there needs to be a lot more communication, a lot more implementation of technology. How can we use the technological tools we have available to us, even in our cell phones, our smartphones, to make things move more quickly, to make sure logistics our products are where we need them to be, when we need them to be there. So I think those are some of the things that we've learned a lot and will continue to learn as we move forward.
Yeah, I'll speak for our experience. We've delivered over, I think it's 1.6 billion vaccine doses. 1 billion of them were outside the U.S. And the freezer infrastructure, I know we ended up having to create partnerships, and we would literally ship mobile freezers to small cities, within Africa. I think there's 2 million, we had 2 million doses delivered by drone. But this is a very complicated world in terms of, because it's frozen, you don't have a lot of time, and it loses its efficacy pretty quickly. So I agree with you. I do think there has been significant investment in cold chain. I do think there's probably a lot more to go for sure, as you're referencing. Okay, I want to shift a little bit. Maybe we can stick with you, Patrick, for a second, because so we're talking about fortifying the supply chain, and when you look at what happened over the last few years, we had countries completely in lockdown. I'll speak for us and our airline. We had airports in lockdown, which meant that nothing was leaving an airport, whether it was an API, whatever it might be. So a lot of manufacturers like yourself started to think through, okay, am I in good position for the future? Do I need to make some changes? In the media, you hear a lot about nearshoring and friendshoring. So I'm interested to get your perspective in terms of, how COVID affected supply and perhaps some of the manufacturing strategies that you guys are looking at.
Yeah, I think, it's something we really need to talk more about, and I'm glad we're having this discussion today. We've all been taught, I think, to use just-in-time technology and have everything there just at the moment you need it in the manufacturing process or maybe in the healthcare process. And I think there's many benefits to that. But on the other hand, we saw what some of the weaknesses of that strategy is during COVID. We saw countries shut down, as you said, Dan. We saw countries say, well, you know what, this PPE is for our country. We really don't have any to send you right now, so we can't send you anything right now. We saw that happen with vaccines. We saw that happen with medications. And we saw it happen in every country of the world. This country, Europe, Asia, everywhere. People take care of their own first. So we saw that system break down to some degree because of the lack of infrastructures, because of the lack of product, because of a huge demand suddenly coming upon us. And I think we saw very quickly that the just-in-time model is not going to be adequate in a pandemic or any crisis situation.
Excellent, thank you. So we're going to shift topics. We're fortunate to have somebody from AWS, Amazon, and I know I'll speak for myself. When we get someone from Amazon, we always want to know the secret sauce. They've changed so much of our personal and professional lives. So I want to talk a little bit about home health care. And I know there's a session going on next door, but you really can't talk about the pharmaceutical supply chain without having this conversation, because when we take a look at, again, I'm going to go back to my opening, a lot of companies have been successful really making that connection, making our lives at home as easy in healthcare as it is for consumerism. And I think a lot of the medical organizations and even hospital systems are also thinking through, okay, how do I get a patient in their home environment and really support them the way they need to be supported? Dialysis, infusion, acute care, whatever it may be. So with home health, I'm really interested to get your take. Obviously, it's about technology, right? It's the implication of technology in making a patient feel they're connected, making the medical physicians ensure that they're connected and information is going back and forth, and it's easy. Can you tell me a little bit about where you see technology affecting home health and where the opportunities are, maybe for some folks in the audience?
Yeah, happy to share what we are witnessing and observing as change in the way we need to be giving care. We noticed in last 2.5 years how the hospital systems were burning out their own staff. It was not easy. The COVID took precedence compared to any other problems any other patients had. And that was the dire situation. What we learned out of that is, of course, the ability for people to take virtual care and be able to stay connected with their physicians from wherever they are at. And we learned that people can be treated from where they are at, particularly in their homes. How can we keep people longer at homes and reduce the burden on the hospital system is very important. The other challenge that we see is care shifting to home as well as care shifting to, let's say, alternate care sites or outpatient care sites as well. So with that change that we are going to be witnessing, how do we understand how patient and providers stay connected in a meaningful way? And that's where technology comes to play. We will notice that there are going to be digital means for people to be able to monitor their own health. And we call it remote patient monitoring right now, particularly chronic disease state where one disease can lead to multiple, and keeping eye on their health is extremely important. Monitor their health is important. And connecting that instruments data back to the providers so that they understand where their patients are at and how they are taking care of their health is becoming more and more important. Now with that said, there are a lot of other changes we might see is also diagnosis moving to homes where possible, and there is innovation, and we've been talking about this a lot. A lot of innovations are happening, a lot of new startups are coming about, a lot of tech companies are trying to apply technologies to solve some of these complex problems and to figure out how can we connect this ecosystem, make it more interoperable, how do we transition data and make data meaningfully available to patients themselves, to the providers and other stakeholders in the ecosystem. And to do that, we have to liquidate data, make data more actionable, and make it available to right people in a rightful way with complete security, privacy, and compliance applied. At the same time, the focus should be the value that we bring to the care. So value-based care is something that will be measured and then rewarded in line with what benefits patients are getting and the care they're getting. So home health care is a beginning of what we will see, a change in the care continuum as we go forward.
Yeah, excellent. Now, Patrick, I know when we were speaking earlier, you mentioned at-home diagnostics and, obviously being the tip of the spear. Any comments or thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. We, when I was at the Lundbeck company, we did some research on diagnostics and to monitor depression in the home and using smartphones. And there was some really exciting data that we could collect with the, obviously, permission of the patients that allowed the patients to really monitor the depression and see if they're actually getting better or worse. That would allow them to adjust their therapies, whatever they might be. So getting those data points on a literally hour-by-hour basis was super helpful for those patients and their physicians to help them treat their disease.
Excellent. I think about diagnostics at home. Last night I was having a chat with somebody in the room here, and it was around Exact Sciences. And we've done work with Exact Sciences for 6 years before they literally had FDA approval, for the diagnostic test at home. But I think about that, and this is 6 years ago, and all of the work was really around what does the kit need to look like? How do I make it very easy for the customer to register, to connect to the results? How do I get that kit back out of the house as quick as possible? We all know sometimes we get the diagnostic kits and they sit on the kitchen table or they sit on, the dresser drawer for weeks. So it was interesting because the strategy, right, and it is a logistic strategy to work on how you identify, how you use data to make sure you know where everything is, how you follow up to make sure that the patient not only does the test, but is getting it back into the system. How do you make it easy for the patient to get the test back into the system? And I think this diagnostics, and you mentioned this earlier, it has been the tip of the spear in terms of at-home service. I'm amazed at some of the technology that's coming out new equipment that can draw blood, 600 milliliters of blood. You can do a lot of tests with that, right? And you're not dripping it, one drop at a time out of your finger, but there's some technology that can do it in a much less painful way. Centrifuges, I think we were mentioning this, centrifuges that literally can spin the blood right then and there, so that it gives it a little bit more shelf life. Anyway, exciting times there. So I want to shift here a little bit because the word collaboration was used a lot on the opening. And I'd like to get both of your perspectives on this because you've certainly seen a lot of collaboration in the business you're in, and you have seen co-opetition just being in pharma. From our perspective, we were engaged with Operation Warp Speed fairly early. And when it was called Operation Warp Speed, Pfizer, Moderna, UPS, FedEx, who would have thought, right? Brown and purple on the same conference call. And it was great because everyone was focused on the mission, and you really saw people jumping into each other's lanes to help for the common cause. And I'll just say that my personal experience, I've seen some different interactions with government agencies. Government agencies interact better with each other, which is a whole different topic, as you probably know. But anyway, yeah, I'd like to get your perspective. Maybe we start with you, Dr. D'Souza.
Yeah, so besides what we observed during COVID and how everybody collaborated, we also heard earlier from Dr. Calif how important it is to stay collaborative, to be able to get better outcomes for health. And other things that we are also observing is a lot of consortia are happening. The members from different areas or segments are coming together to solve a problem and keeping their commercial interest at the same time controlled and managed. There are a lot of redundancies and duplicate work we observe is done by members in our industry thinking they're protecting their IP or that they want the data, next generation sequencing data, omics data, they want to have real world data to be able to get better insights, if you will, and to be able to inform the scientific community with what new therapies that they can focus on. And as we see the cell therapy, the gene therapy, the rare diseases market is getting better outcomes is because we are observing collaboration has started and it is going to happen more and more. And the one important thing is we will also see drugs coming out to the market faster. So the speed and the agility and to be innovative is something that technology is going to enable for the organization to think digital, to think outside the box. We are also observing changes in digital way. What I'm observing is digital health, digital therapeutics, software as a medical device, if you will. So if you see these terms, they are not just terms anymore, they are becoming real. The infusion of artificial intelligence and machine learning in the workflows and removing those frictions from the workflows, augmenting intelligence at the point of care, who would have thought about, but it is happening, it's coming. We all see that images can be diagnosed and augmented with intelligence as people are looking at the outcomes, and multidimensional images are coming out. The minimally invasive or less invasive surgeries are happening. So there is a change in our ecosystem, and collaboration is going to help us get the outcomes that we are looking for. So meaningfully investing the resources to get the outcomes, to move fast and get better health for the population is going to be super important. And for that, we all need to be playing our respective roles and do what we can to help enable that. So excellent. I will hope you have some things to add here too.
Yes, I do. Along with all the new innovative medications that are being developed, we also know that it's important that the medications we currently have, and we've had for many, many years, and that many of you health professionals know and love and use on a daily basis for your patients, have to be available to us. And I want to share with you, in the case of many of our medications, 80 to 90% of them are made overseas. In fact, in our case, for U.S. antibiotics, we make amoxicillin products. So capsules, tablets, and oral suspensions, that are used to treat ear infections. My children use them many, many times over the course of their childhood. Now they're all 20 and 30 years old. But they made it through. They have their hearing, no problems. But imagine, if you will, they didn't have those medications when they had their ear infection. We'd have people with loss of hearing, or perhaps no hearing. So I think it's something to keep in mind. We need also a reliable supply of medications that we use on a daily basis, and that requires public-private partnership. There's no amoxicillin active ingredient available in the United States right now. It doesn't exist. Nobody manufactures the active ingredient amoxicillin. We have to buy it from Europe, and we make our capsules and our tablets in Tennessee. But we're the last facility available to do that. If there were some disruption in supply, whether that be pandemic, a conflict of some sort, that could cut off our medication supply. And not only amoxicillin, but many, many medications that we rely on. 80 to 90% are produced overseas. So that could put us here in the United States at risk. It's something we need to think about and look for ways of incentivizing people in business to make investments to produce those medications here, at least a portion of the supply, so we don't have so much reliance on outside forces. So something we need to think about as an industry, and something we're trying to change at US Antibiotics.
Excellent. No, thank you both. Thank you both. So we are nearing our time, but maybe what we can do is, under 1 minute, any closing comments or thoughts about the future of pharmaceutical supply chain and future of pharmaceuticals in general?
Yeah, I think we will see the changes in the model. Right now, the supply is going B2B, if you will. Going forward, we'll see direct-to-consumer supply quite a bit, and that will bring the required speed for patients to be able to consume, whether it is a diagnosis or a medication or whatever that might be, and be able to provide the results back in a timely manner. So we will see the changes. The consumerism is happening to our industry, and we need to be paying attention to that, and we would demand that and expect that, because yes, it can be done. So it's not a technology anymore as a problem, but applying that technology in a meaningful way to get the outcomes we are looking for is something we are going to witness. And all those people who are coming new into this industry, I would want to welcome them and think about what problems could you be solving and how we could collectively make a difference in the journey for getting better health for the patients. So thank you for the opportunity, and speed, reliability, and resiliency for supply chain is important, so thanks.
Excellent. Patrick?
Yeah, two things. One, all those young, dynamic, innovative brains out there, please help us solve all these problems, because we've got a lot. And secondly, let's keep the patients in mind. Always, 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 we need to keep the patient in mind. Think about what they're going through. Try and make their journey through their disease or through their treatment better and more easy to deal with. I think that's something we all need to think about.
Yes, no, that's great. Great comments. I'll just wrap it up with this, and that if those of you who are entering the healthcare industry, there is no better place. When you think about the growing world population, we're adding 1 billion people every 10 years, 1 billion people. On top of that, the growth of chronic disease, right? And it was mentioned earlier, diabetes, cardiac, autoimmune disease, right? It's growing so quickly. I read a statistic the other day that said that over 40% of the world's population has more than 2 chronic diseases. So that's pretty incredible. And the innovation that's happening in healthcare is allowing people to have a chronic disease and live not just 10, 20, but up to 40 years. And when you look at healthcare and what it's doing in the world, and of course, I think just the future, it's a great segment to be in. So anyway, I think with that, I want to thank very much our guests here for coming in and sharing your thoughts. And again, thank you for being here, and looking forward to meeting some of you after the session.
Thank you.